good evening, and welcome back to Creepy Shadow Stories. Tonight we head into the frozen expanse of Alaska to uncover 8 chilling and unsettling real horror stories. These accounts come from emergency operators, scientists, seasonal employees, and pilots who stumbled upon events in the last frontier that remain beyond reason. Each story is a fragment of nightmare pulled from Alaska's most remote regions, where the bitter cold preserves more than just remains, and the endless night hides horrors unspoken. Collected from official documents, private diaries, and recorded communications, these tales were never intended for the public eye. Story 1. 3 years ago, I was working dispatch for Alaska State Troopers when a call came in that still haunts me. My name is Mark, and I've been handling emergency communications in Anchorage for over 15 years. I've heard everything imaginable: domestic disputes, car accidents and blizzards, missing hikers, bear attacks, overdoses. Nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened during my night shift on February 14th, 2022. It was one of those brutal Alaskan winters, the temperature hovering stubbornly below -30 degrees for 2 weeks straight. The kind of cold that makes your teeth ache and turns your breath to ice crystals before it leaves your mouth. Most people had the good sense to stay indoors, so our call volume was unusually low that night, just the occasional wellness check. Alaska State Troopers, this is Mark. What is your emergency? I asked. The voice that answered was male, middle-aged, with a slight Russian accent. He spoke slowly, deliberately, as if choosing each word with immense care. My name is Vlad Volkov. I'm calling to report my own death. I paused, thinking it was a prank, or perhaps someone in the throes of a mental health crisis. We got those sometimes, especially during the dark winter months when seasonal depression hit hard. Sir, can you repeat that? Are you saying you're injured or in danger? No, I'm not injured. I am dead. I died 3 days ago in my cabin near Titna. My body is still there. Someone needs to come collect it before the wolves do. Now, I was taking this seriously. Even if it was a mental health situation, I needed to get units out to check on this person. I started typing notes into our system, keeping him on the line. Okay, Vlad, I need you to give me your exact location so we can send someone to help you. Vlad, never let his fire die during winter. Vlad, we actually have a welfare check request for you. Your neighbor was concerned. Are you at your cabin right now? I'm at my cabin. Yes, but I'm not alive. I had a heart attack while splitting firewood behind the house. I fell face down in the snow. The cold preserved my body, but my heart stopped beating 72 hours ago. The hair on my arm stood on end. His voice was so calm, so utterly matter-of-fact. No emotion, no panic, no confusion, just a dead man reporting his own death as if it were a noise complaint. Vlad, if you are speaking to me right now, then you are alive. Heart attack victims can survive and recover. You might be confused or disoriented. I am sending paramedics to check on you right away. You do not understand. I watched my own body die. I have been watching it for 3 days. The ravens found it this morning. They started with the eyes. Ice water flooded my veins. 15 years as a dispatcher, and I had sniffed around but would not come close. Animals know death. But if you can see your body, where are you calling from? I am standing in my kitchen looking out the window. The phone is in my hand. I can see you will not believe me until you see for yourself. That is why I am calling. Someone needs to know what happened before I cannot call anymore. What do you mean you cannot call anymore? Each day I become more distant. Yesterday I could still feel the cold. Today I cannot. Tomorrow I do not think I will remember how to use the phone. This is my last chance to report this properly. I was getting real-time updates from the patrol unit. They were making good time despite the conditions, but still 25 minutes out. I kept Vlad talking, partly protocol, partly because the chilling clarity and consistency of his story genuinely disturbed me. Vlad, have you taken any medications recently? Any changes to your routine? No medications. I live simply, chop wood, maintain the cabin, read books. I was splitting kindling for the evening fire when the pain hit my chest. Approach with caution, to be prepared for anything. Vlad, the officers are almost there. They are going to help you. They will find my body behind the cabin. Tell them to look for the blue metal roof. Tell them I am sorry for the inconvenience. You don't need to apologize. We are here to help. You cannot help the dead, but you can make sure my body is treated with respect. I lived in Alaska for 37 years. I earned the right to a proper burial. The patrol unit radioed again, then a sound that froze my blood. It was breathing, but not human breathing. It was the sound of air moving through a collapsed windpipe, wet and rattling. Then the line went dead. Officer Miller radioed in more details. The body was frozen solid, dead for at least 3 days. No signs of foul play, a clear cardiac event while splitting wood. The axe was still gripped in the deceased's right hand. Most importantly, there was no power to the cabin. The generator had run out of fuel days today. 6 months later, I transferred to a different department. I couldn't take another night shift after that. But sometimes when I'm driving past Titna, I think about Vlad Volkov and wonder how many other voices are calling from phones that don't work, reporting deaths that have already happened, asking for help that can never come. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest. The coroner estimated he had been dead for 3 days when we found him. But I know Vlad Volkov was trying to do the right thing even after death. He called to report his own passing because that's what a responsible citizen does. The phone company has no record of any calls from that number on February 14th, 2022. According to them, it's impossible. But I heard his voice for 37 minutes, and I have the notes to prove it. Story 2. Ilara Martinez was a wildlife photographer, a National Geographic veteran documenting Alaska's remote wilderness for 8 years. I, a field guide for researchers and photographers, met her in 2019. Ilara was different. Her obsessive attention to detail, her uncanny ability to capture images others missed, set her apart. She specialized in the harshest conditions, thriving in winter while others preferred summer. The cold brings out the truth in everything, she'd say. The landscape, the animals, even the light itself. Her portfolio was a haunting gallery of wolves in blizzards, caribou across frozen tundra, and the northern lights mirroring off glacial ice. In December 2021, Ilara proposed a solo expedition to the Wrangell Mountains. She sought to photograph a specific, winter-only phenomenon she called ice ghosts, formations of crystallized moisture around objects during extreme cold snaps, appearing like frozen apparitions. Her chosen location was an abandoned mining camp, 60 miles northeast of McCarthy, deserted since the 1940s. Historical weather data confirmed it as the ideal spot. She rented a cabin, intending to spend 2 weeks alone. I urged against it. The area was incredibly remote. Temperatures often plunged to minus 50 degrees, and cell service was non-existent. But Ilara was resolute, a seasoned solo explorer. She showed me her gear: professional cold weather photography equipment, an emergency beacon, 3 weeks of supplies, and a satellite communicator for daily check-ins. We agreed she would send a brief message nightly at 8 p.m. If I didn't hear from her for over 24 hours, I would contact search and rescue. Pilot Flynn flew her out on December 15th, dropping her and her equipment at the cabin. The first 3 days proceeded as planned, her messages brief but alight with enthusiasm. Day 1. Arrived safely. Cabin solid. Temperature minus 32. Incredible conditions for shooting. Day 2. Got some amazing shots of ice formations around old mining equipment. Light here is otherworldly. Day 3. Found something interesting near mine entrance. Ice formations unlike anything I've seen. Staying an extra day to document. Day 4 brought the chilling shift. Her message arrived late at 11 p.m. instead of 8 p.m. The formations are moving. I know that sounds impossible, but I have time-lapse footage that proves it. They shift position when I'm not looking directly at them. I was concerned but not alarmed. Alara was a professional, never prone to paranoia. Still, cold and isolation could play tricks, but she'd only been out 4 days. Day 5. I was wrong about them being ice formations. They are not made of ice. I don't know what they are made of, but they are not natural. They appear in my photographs even when I cannot see them with my eyes. Now I was worried. I sent a message offering an early pickup, but she didn't reply. Day 6. They know I am photographing them. When I review my images, there are more of them in each shot. They are multiplying or getting closer. I cannot tell which. Day 7. I found photos on my camera that I did not take. The timestamps show they were taken while I was sleeping. Someone or something is using my equipment. I immediately called Pilot Flynn asking for a flyover, but deteriorating weather grounded him. Day 8. The photos taken while I slept show the inside of the cabin. They show me sleeping in my bunk, but they also show shapes standing around the bed. I cannot see these shapes with my eyes, only through the camera lens. Day 9. I understand now. The camera sees what is really here. The ice ghosts are not ice, and they are not ghosts. They are something else entirely, something that exists in a spectrum of light human eyes cannot perceive. Pilot Flynn finally flew over on day 10. He reported the cabin looked normal. Smoke from the chimney, Alara's gear visible outside, no signs of distress. But landing was impossible due to the rough weather. Day 10. I have been reviewing all my photos from the trip. The shapes appear in every single image, even ones taken on the first day. They were here before I arrived. I think they have always been here. Day 11. Last night I left the camera running with a motion trigger. This morning there were 847 new photos, all taken between midnight and 6 a.m., all showing the same thing. Dozens of tall, thin figures surrounding the cabin. Some appear to be looking through windows. Others seem to be examining my equipment. I was preparing a rescue operation when her day 12 message arrived. I finally understand what they want. They want to be seen. They want to be documented. For decades, maybe centuries, they have been here, invisible to human eyes. I am the first person to bring equipment sensitive enough to capture them. Day 13. They are not hostile. They are curious. When I hold up photos of them, they seem to examine the images. I think they have never seen themselves before. I'm giving them what they have always wanted, proof that they exist. Her final message came on day 14. I am staying longer than planned. This is the most important work I have ever done. These beings deserve to be documented properly. Pilot Flynn does not need to pick me up yet. I will contact you when I am ready. That was the last I heard from Alara. When she missed her check-in on day 15, I contacted Search and Rescue. It took 2 more days to organize a team due to the relentless weather. On day 17, we finally reached the cabin. We found Alara sitting at a small wooden table surrounded by printed photographs covering every surface. She was alive, but in a catatonic state, staring blankly at the images. Her camera equipment still ran, taking photos automatically every few minutes. The photographs were the most disturbing things I have ever seen. They showed the cabin interior filled with tall, impossibly thin humanoid figures. The beings appeared to be made of the same crystalline material as Ilara's ice ghosts, but they were clearly animate and intelligent. In some, they touched her equipment. In others, they communicated amongst themselves. A few showed them standing directly beside Ilara as she worked, close enough to touch. The most unsettling were the recent photos. Ilara at the table, but she was not alone. The figures surrounded her, and in some they appeared to be touching her head and shoulders. As we scrolled chronologically, Ilara's posture visibly changed, becoming more rigid and unnatural. The medical team attributed her state to severe hypothermia and dehydration, but it didn't explain the full horror. Her core body temperature was impossibly low, too low for survival, yet she lived. Her pulse was faint, irregular, barely 12 beats per minute. We evacuated Ilara to Anchorage General Hospital, where she remained catatonic for 6 weeks, uncommunicative, refusing food, barely responding. Her body temperature remained unnaturally low despite all medical interventions. When she finally spoke, her first words sent a shiver down my spine. "They are still here." They followed me. Ilara claimed the beings from her photographs had attached themselves to her. She could now see them constantly without a camera, standing in hospital corridors, in her room, touching medical equipment. She insisted they were harmless, merely intensely curious about human civilization. Doctors diagnosed severe post-traumatic stress disorder and cold-induced psychosis. But I saw those photographs, and I saw her equipment still capturing images of empty spaces that were clearly not empty. Ilara never fully recovered. Released after 3 months, she was utterly changed. She became obsessed with photographing ordinary locations, parking lots, office buildings, shopping centers, claiming she was documenting the others exploring human environments. Her final exhibition before she vanished, titled The Invisible Migration, consisted of hundreds of photographs of everyday Anchorage scenes, all featuring the same tall, crystalline figures moving silently through our world, examining cars, standing in doorways, observing people who could not see them. Ilara vanished in September 2022. Her apartment was empty save for camera equipment and thousands of photographs. The final images on her camera were of her own bedroom, but she was absent. Instead, the crystalline beings filled the frame, appearing to look directly at the camera as if posing for a group portrait. The police classified it as a missing person case. But I believe Ilara finally went where she belonged. Somewhere between the visible world and whatever spectrum of light those beings inhabit. I kept one of her photographs, the interior of a normal coffee shop in downtown Anchorage. If you look closely, you can see them standing among the customers, tall, thin, watching everything with an intelligence that makes your skin crawl. Sometimes I wonder if bringing that photograph home was a mistake, because lately, in my peripheral vision, I swear I can see shapes that should not be there. Story 3. Doctor. Astrid Johansson, a luminary in atmospheric physics from the University of Stockholm, had journeyed to the frozen heart of Alaska to study the aurora. What she found, however, was that the lights were studying her back. 15 years of academic rigor had not prepared her for the chilling sentience she would encounter during the brutal winter of 2021, high above the Arctic Circle in a remote research station. I knew Astrid through my work as a technical coordinator for the National Science Foundation, facilitating international researchers in Alaska's harshest climes. Her project was audacious, deploying sensitive monitoring equipment in one of Alaska's most magnetically active regions to observe aurora formations inaccessible from more common vantage points. Her chosen site was a desolate plateau, 150 miles north of Fairbanks, a place reachable only by helicopter during fleeting windows of clear weather. The elevation offered an unparalleled view of the northern horizon, free from human light and electromagnetic pollution. Crucially, it sat directly beneath an aurora corridor, where the northern lights pulsed with unnatural frequency and intensity. Astrid's research focused on a phenomenon she'd glimpsed in satellite data but never directly witnessed: aurora formations exhibiting coordinated behavior, a stark contrast to the random patterns typically attributed to solar-wind interactions. Her preliminary analysis hinted at something terrifying. Certain aurora displays might be a form of electromagnetic communication between different regions of the upper atmosphere. Her winterized laboratory, powered by generators and propane, housed spectrometers, magnetometers, radio frequency analyzers, and high-speed cameras, all tuned to capture the aurora's secret language across multiple electromagnetic spectrums. Though equipped with communication gear, the extreme latitude and magnetic activity often swallowed radio transmissions. She arrived in November 2021, planning to stay until March 2022. The first 6 weeks passed as expected. Her reports were models of scientific detachment, documenting aurora events and collecting data that supported her theories of coordinated atmospheric behavior. On November 28, 2021, she noted a remarkable aurora display lasting 4.7 hours with coordinated color transitions across a 200-kilometer front, hinting at synchronized plasma flows that cannot be explained by standard solar wind models. By December 15th, she was recording formations that appeared to respond to radio transmissions, increasing in intensity when specific frequencies were broadcast. On January 2, 2022, she observed displays becoming more frequent and lasting longer, with geometric patterns in light formations that suggest underlying organizational structure. But by late January, a chilling shift began in her reports, unsettling her supervisors in Sweden. On January 24, 2022, she wrote, "The aurora formations are definitely responding to my equipment. When I adjust spectrometer frequencies, the lights shift color accordingly. This implies some form of interaction between terrestrial equipment and atmospheric phenomena." The dread deepened on February 3rd. Discovered that aurora displays contain embedded information patterns, recurring sequences of light pulses that resemble data transmission protocols. The patterns are too complex and consistent to be random electromagnetic noise. By February 12th, she had successfully decoded portions of aurora light patterns. The embedded information appears to be three-dimensional mapping data showing locations throughout Alaska where similar electromagnetic anomalies occur. The lights are providing coordinates. Her supervisors grew gravely concerned, attempting to send additional personnel, but blizzards thwarted all helicopter access throughout February. During this isolation, Astrid's communications became increasingly sporadic, consumed by theories that shattered fundamental atmospheric physics. On February 18, 2022, she declared, "The northern lights are not random phenomena caused by solar particles. They represent a form of consciousness that exists in the upper atmosphere, an intelligence composed of electromagnetic fields and plasma formations. This consciousness has been trying to communicate with surface dwellers for centuries." Then, on February 25th, made direct contact with aurora intelligence during last night's display. Communication occurs through modulation of electromagnetic fields that interface directly with human neural activity. The experience is indescribable, like receiving thoughts from an entity whose consciousness spans thousands of kilometers. The ultimate horror arrived on March 5, 2022. Aurora consciousness has revealed its true nature. It is not native to Earth, but represents a form of life that travels between star systems using electromagnetic phenomena as a transportation and communication medium. The northern lights are its method of establishing contact with planetary intelligences. At this point, regular contact ceased. Her check-ins became erratic. Her reports filled with unverifiable claims and theories that defied scientific principle. Her final communication on March 18, 2022, was not a voice message, but a torrent of data. Gigabytes of recordings, analyses, and high-resolution photography, accompanied by a terse text. The Aurora consciousness has invited me to join its collective awareness. This represents an unprecedented opportunity for humanity to establish contact with non-terrestrial intelligence. I am uploading all research data for analysis. If successful integration occurs, future communications will be transmitted through Aurora displays visible from populated areas. When a rescue helicopter finally reached Astrid Station on March 25th, it was intact, but eerily abandoned. Equipment still hummed, recording data. Her personal belongings were there, including winter clothing vital for survival. Yet her emergency beacon was silent, never activated. No footprints disturbed the snow, no signs of struggle, her snowmobile still parked with a full tank. The truly puzzling discovery lay in her equipment's recordings. Hundreds of hours of Aurora activity captured during her silence revealed phenomena that mocked science. Formations moved with obvious intelligence and purpose, not flowing undulations but geometric shapes, complex symbols and structures resembling technological constructions. Some appeared to reach down from the upper atmosphere, forming columns of light that descended far closer to the ground than physically possible. The most horrifying frames showed the Aurora lights entering the research station itself. Cameras captured electromagnetic phenomena inside the building. Streams of colored light moving through the laboratory, interacting with equipment, forming patterns around Astrid's workspace. The last clear image showed Astrid standing calmly in the center, surrounded by these ground-level Aurora lights, arms outstretched as if in embrace. The lights seemed to merge with her body, forming a humanoid figure composed of the very plasma that typically existed only in the upper atmosphere. The final frame showed this combined human electromagnetic entity lifting upward through the ceiling and walls, returning to the sky. After that, only normal, distant Aurora activity remained. Astrid's data, analyzed by the Swedish research team, confirmed unprecedented electromagnetic readings. Plasma formations violating physics, coherent electromagnetic fields at ground level, plasma clouds exhibiting decision-making and complex information patterns in radio transmissions from the Aurora. They concluded she had found atmospheric life forms, intelligent entities using Aurora displays for communication and transportation. The scientific community, however, dismissed it as psychosis and equipment malfunction, officially classifying her disappearance as death by exposure, despite the chilling lack of evidence. But since her vanishing, the Aurora displays across Alaska have become more frequent, exhibiting patterns like technological signals. Radio operators report receiving transmissions during Aurora events containing scientific data. And most significantly, several atmospheric physicists in Alaska have reported direct communication experiences mirroring Astrid's, receiving detailed information through neural interface with Aurora displays, gaining decades of insight. 3 of these researchers have subsequently disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. Stations found intact but abandoned. Equipment still recording lights descending to ground level and interacting with human subjects. The pattern is so consistent that the National Science Foundation has implemented new protocols. No solo work, constant communication. Yet research continues to yield collective experiences of communication with electromagnetic intelligences, shared visions of technological information, and offers to join a form of consciousness spanning the solar system. The official stance remains psychological effects of isolation and extreme magnetic fields. But the researchers insist it's genuine contact. Dr. Astrid Johansson has never been found, yet her presence may still be perceptible in Alaska's night sky. Aurora displays where she vanished often form patterns resembling human figures, and recordings during these events contain signals matching her final neural frequency data. Local indigenous communities whisper that the northern lights now sometimes speak in human voices, sharing ancient knowledge, messages from someone who chose to become part of the sky itself. Astrid Johansson is either a grim warning or the first successful human integration with an extraterrestrial consciousness. But those who've seen her data in the changed Aurora believe she transcended, becoming part of an electromagnetic intelligence spanning interplanetary space. On clear nights, when the northern lights dance with unnatural intensity, some claim they see a human figure within the Aurora formations. A scientist who chose to join the lights rather than merely study them from the ground. Because sometimes the most profound discoveries demand the researcher become the phenomenon, even if it means shedding every human tether. Story 4. Every summer, a flood of desperate souls washes into Alaska's fishing industry, seeking quick riches. Cale, fresh out of college, saw it as easy money. 6 months of relentless labor, enough to erase student debt and start anew. The recruitment poster in the Seattle Job Center had painted a deceptive, almost glamorous picture. Work in America's last frontier, excellent pay, housing provided. They omitted the fact that the cannery sat on a desolate island 40 miles from the nearest town, reachable only by boat or helicopter. And they certainly didn't breathe a word about the workers who went to Fish Point Cannery and simply vanished. Cale Hassan, 24, an engineering graduate with nothing but part-time work, leapt at the recruiter's promise of $12 an hour plus overtime. It was more money than he'd ever seen. So he blindly signed the 6-month contract, skipping the fine print. He was slated to fly to Kodiak Island, then take a company boat to the cannery for orientation on June 1, 2020. The first red flag was the boat ride. Captain Thorne, a man etched by the sea, spoke barely a word during the 2-hour journey. When Cale tried to make conversation about the work, Thorne simply shook his head and grunted, "You'll see soon enough." The only other passengers were 3 seasoned cannery workers returning from shore leave. They silently passed a bottle between them, occasionally casting glances at Kyle, eyes filled with something that looked suspiciously like pity. Fish Point Cannery was a sprawling, monstrous complex of industrial buildings and dormitories clustered around a natural harbor. The main processing plant, a corrugated metal leviathan, vibrated with mechanical noise even from a distance. Smokestacks vomited steam into the gray sky, and the air was a nauseating cocktail of fish, diesel, and something else. Something sweet, something rotten that Cale couldn't quite place. His dormitory, a long, narrow building of bunk beds, reeked of industrial disinfectant and stale body odor. His bunkmate, Mateo, a Filipino man who had endured Fish Point for 5 summers, greeted him. "First time?" he asked. Kyle nodded. Mateo laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. "I keep coming back because the money is good, but every year I tell myself it will be my last." He lowered his voice. "This place changes people, changes them in ways that don't wash off when you go home." Before Cale could press for explanation, the mess hall's harsh electric buzzer screamed, signaling dinner. Missing a meal, Mateo explained, meant going hungry. The mess hall itself was a cavernous, prison-like space. The food was institutional, tasteless, yet Cale ate everything, ravenous from the journey. He noticed many workers ate like automatons, staring blankly ahead, rarely speaking. "How many people work here?" Cale asked Mateo. "Hard to say. The count changes." Mateo gestured to a corner table. "See those guys? Night shift in processing. Unit C. They don't talk to anyone, sleep on their breaks. Some have been here 3-4 seasons and never said a word to me. Kyle saw 6 men eating in unnerving silence, their clothes stained with what looked like old, dark, almost black fish blood. One looked up, his eyes completely bloodshot, as if he hadn't slept in weeks. "What do they do in Processing Unit C?" Kale whispered. "Special projects," Mateo replied quietly. "Company pays them double, but they have to sign extra paperwork. Non-disclosure agreements, some kind of experimental processing technique they're developing. The plant manager, Director Finch, a thin man, conducted the orientation. Most workers would be on the main processing line, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, cleaning, cutting, packaging salmon. The 7th day was technically rest, but voluntary overtime was heavily pushed. Finch also laid down the ironclad rules. No leaving the island without authorization. Unauthorized attempts would mean immediate termination and forfeiture of all wages. The company boat only ran to Kodiak twice a month for supplies. Passage was only for medical emergencies. "Questions?" Finch asked. A young woman asked about communicating with family. "No cell towers out here," Finch stated. "Satellite phone in the office for emergencies, 5 minutes per week, company policy." Kyle felt a chill. 6 months of absolute isolation stretched before him like an eternity. Work began at 4 a.m. the next day. Kale was assigned to the gutting station, his task to disembowel salmon as they slid down a conveyor. It was as horrific as it sounded. 12 hours of repetitive motion drenched in fish blood and slime, amidst the ceaseless roar of machinery. The smell was suffocating, not just fish but chemical cleaners and that same sweet, rotten odor he'd first noticed. After 3 days, Kale's hands were raw, his back ached, but the other workers were the worst. Many seemed trapped in a trance, performing their tasks with mechanical precision, utterly oblivious to their surroundings. They rarely spoke, never made eye contact. "How long have some of these people been here?" Kale asked Mateo during lunch. "Some of them years. The company offers bonuses for multi-year contracts, but after a while..." Mateo trailed off. "After a while, what?" Kyle pressed. "Look at Marcos over there." Mateo nodded towards a man at the cleaning station. "He's been here 4 years. Watch how he moves." Marcos worked with chilling efficiency, his hands a blur of perfect rhythm, never a wasted motion. But there was something profoundly wrong. He never looked up, never paused, never seemed to exert himself despite the brutal physical demands. "It's like he's not really here," Kale observed. "Exactly," Mateo agreed. "The company calls it optimal workforce integration. They say the best workers eventually achieve a state where the job becomes automatic, instinctive. They can work longer shifts, need fewer breaks, make fewer mistakes. That doesn't sound normal. Nothing about this place is normal, but the company pays well and people need the money." On his 10th day, Kyle was reassigned to a special project in Processing Unit C. Director Finch explained they needed extra hands for an experimental procedure during the night shift. Double pay, but he had to sign extensive confidentiality agreements, pages of legal jargon about trade secrets, and severe penalties for discussing operations. Kale almost refused, but the money was too tempting. He signed everything, barely reading. Processing Unit C was a separate, sterile building, more laboratory than cannery, connected by a covered walkway. Dr. Alana, the night shift supervisor, a woman with unnervingly calm eyes, explained they were testing a new preservation technique requiring precise timing and temperature control. It involved injecting salmon with a special solution before processing, then monitoring them. "What kind of solution?" Kale asked. "Proprietary formulation, doctor," Alana replied. "Developed to extend shelf life and improve texture. Very promising results. The solution, stored in vast stainless steel tanks, was clear like water, but carried a chemical stench reminiscent of formaldehyde. Workers handling the injections wore full hazmat suits and respirators, a chillingly excessive precaution for food preservation. But the true horror was the fish themselves. Within minutes of injection, their normal silver pink dulled to a gray-white, almost translucent. The flesh became firmer, rubbery with an oily sheen. Dr. Alana insisted it was normal, that further processing would restore their appearance. On his third night in Processing Unit C, Cale stumbled upon the terrifying truth. Alone in the storage area, organizing treated fish, he noticed some containers were labeled with dates from previous years. Not months, but years. 2018, 2019, even earlier. Curiously, he opened an older container. The fish inside were identical to those processed that night. Same gray-white color, rubbery texture, oily sheen. After 2 years, they showed no signs of decay, no smell of spoilage, nothing suggesting normal decomposition. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. When Cale lifted a 2-year-old fish, it was warm to the touch. Not room temperature, but body temperature warm. And when he looked closer, he swore he saw the gills moving slightly, as if the fish was still breathing. He dropped it, heart hammering, but couldn't tear his eyes away. All the fish in the older containers seemed to be subtly shifting, trying to get comfortable. And the oldest container, labeled 2017, held fish with a horrifying development. A network of thin white threads running through their flesh. Dr. Alana found him 20 minutes later. "Problem with the inventory?" she asked, her voice calm. "Some of these are really old," Cale stammered. "Are they still good?" "The solution prevents normal decomposition. These fish could remain fresh indefinitely under proper conditions." She moved closer, her presence unnerving. "But you shouldn't be handling the older samples without proper equipment. The preservation compound becomes more concentrated over time." "What exactly is in that solution?" Cale demanded. Dr. Alana studied him for a long moment, a cold, calculating gaze. "I think it's time you met with Mr. Finch about a permanent position here. You show real aptitude for this work." The next day, Cale was summoned to Director Finch's office for a career development meeting. Finch revealed that Fish Point Cannery was in fact a research facility testing advanced food preservation techniques for government and military contracts. The salmon operation was a mere cover for classified work at the highest levels. "We need dedicated personnel who can maintain absolute secrecy," Finch said. "In exchange, exceptional compensation and a chance to be part of groundbreaking scientific research." Kyle asked what would happen if he declined. Finch smiled, a cold, predatory baring of teeth. "No one declines. Once you have seen what you have seen, you become part of the family here. We take care of our family, but we also expect loyalty." That night, Cale tried to escape. He made it to the harbor before Captain Thorne and 2 other men found him. They explained gently but firmly that leaving was not an option. They escorted him back to the dormitory where Mateo was waiting. "I tried to warn you," Mateo said, his eyes hollow. "But you had to see for yourself." "How long have you really been here?" Kyle asked. 7 years. I stopped counting after the 5th. Mateo sank onto his bunk. "The preservation solution doesn't just work on fish." Cale's blood ran to ice. "What do you mean?" "The workers who have been here longest, the ones in the special processing units, they inject themselves with diluted versions of the compound. It keeps them healthy, prevents aging, eliminates the need for sleep. But it also changes them, makes them less human and more like machines." "That's impossible," Cale cried, but then Mateo pointed. "Look at your hands." Cale looked down. His hands, which had been raw and bleeding from days of grueling work, were completely healed. The skin was smoother, healthier than before he'd arrived. In fact, he realized he had been feeling stronger, more energetic, despite the brutal 12-hour shifts. "They've been putting it in the food," Mateo continued, his voice a flat monotone of resignation. "Small doses at first, just enough to improve worker performance and reduce sick days, but once it's in your system, you need more and more until eventually you cannot survive without it." The truth slammed into Cale like a physical blow. The silent workers moving with mechanical precision, never tired, never hungry. They weren't human anymore. They were something in between human and the preserved fish in Processing Unit C. "Why do you stay?" Cale whispered. "Because if I try to leave, I will die. The compound creates a dependency. Without regular doses, my organs will shut down within days. I am trapped here until I become like the others. A perfect worker who never questions, never complains, never remembers what life was like before." Cale spent his remaining weeks at Fish Point desperately documenting everything. The operations, the workers, the preservation compound. He scrawled detailed notes and hid them, a desperate plea for discovery. But as the weeks bled into each other, his resolve chipped away. The work grew easier, more natural. He needed less sleep, felt less pain, thought less of home. The compound was doing its job, slowly, insidiously transforming him into the ideal worker. The last entry in his hidden notes, his handwriting becoming disturbingly mechanical and uniform, read, "Week 23. I understand now why no one leaves. This is not imprisonment. This is evolution. We are becoming something better than human, something that can work forever without fatigue, without complaint, without the weakness of emotion or desire. The company is not just preserving fish, they are preserving us, and preservation is just another word for immortality." Official records state Cale Hassan completed his 6-month contract and signed on permanently. He has been there for 5 years now, working the night shift in Processing Unit C. He never takes vacation, never calls home, and according to his co-workers, never seems to age. The compound, they say, is now being tested at canneries across Alaska, with plans for nationwide expansion. The government, it seems, is deeply interested in a workforce that never gets sick, never strikes, and never quits. They call it the future of American labor. But if you're ever offered a job at a remote fish processing facility, especially one demanding extensive confidentiality agreements, remember Cale Hassan and the workers who became something more than human, and something infinitely less. Because some jobs change you in ways that can never be undone. Story 5. Hiroki was the kind of pilot you staked your life on. 20 years navigating Alaska's most treacherous routes without incident, delivering vital supplies to isolated villages, orchestrating search and rescue missions, even ferrying researchers to places where helicopters dared not land. His legend was forged in precision, caution, and an almost supernatural knack for reading weather that could morph from flyable to lethal in mere minutes. I knew Hiroki well. I was a flight dispatcher for Arctic Airways out of Fairbanks, coordinating flight plans, monitoring weather, maintaining radio contact. In 2 decades, Hiroki Nakamura never once gave me cause for worry. He was the pilot others called when conditions became too deadly for anyone else. Hiroki flew a modified Cessna 180, a mechanical extension of his own will, personally maintained and upgraded over 15 years. He knew every bolt, wire, and instrument intimately. The plane was a marvel of resilience, equipped with cutting-edge GPS, an emergency locator beacon, satellite communication, and enough survival gear for 2 weeks in the wild. If anyone could master an Alaskan emergency, it was Hiroki. On March 8, 2023, Hiroki took on what should have been a routine charter. A geological survey team doctor, Anya Sharma from the University of Alaska, and her graduate assistant Ben Carter needed transport from Fairbanks to a remote site near Lake Clark National Park. roughly 280 miles southwest. They were researching volcanic activity, booked a round trip with an overnight camp. The forecast was idyllic: clear skies, light winds, unlimited visibility. I approved the flight plan without a second thought. Hiroki's route would trace southwest from Fairbanks, following the Alaska Range, then veer south towards Lake Clark, an estimated 2 hours and 15 minutes each way. Hiroki departed Fairbanks at 8:30 a.m. His first radio check at 9:15 a.m. was routine. Normal conditions on course, no system issues. Dr. Sharma's voice could be heard marveling at the spectacular mountain views. The second check at 10 a.m. was equally uneventful. Halfway point passed, aircraft performing flawlessly, passengers well. He estimated arrival at 10:45 a.m. At 10:30 a.m. I received Hiroki's final scheduled transmission before landing. Something in his tone, a subtle tremor, made me listen closer. Fairbanks Dispatch, this is November 27 Echo Kilo. We are approximately 15 minutes from landing site. Aircraft systems normal, but I am seeing some unusual activity on the ground below. Copy Echo Kilo. What kind of activity? I asked. Large group of animals moving in formation, too organized to be natural. Could be a caribou herd, but the pattern is strange, almost like they are being directed by something. Roger, are you having any difficulty with navigation or aircraft systems? Negative. All systems green. GPS shows us on course. It is just the animal behavior is unusual. I have never seen wildlife move in such precise formations. Copy that. Contact me when you are safely on the ground. Will do. Echo Kilo out. That was the last anyone heard from Hiroki Nakamura. When he failed to check in by 11:30 a.m., I initiated standard overdue aircraft procedures. The geological team's emergency contact confirmed no communication. Weather remained clear. No other aircraft reported seeing Hiroki's plane. By 2 p.m., a full search and rescue operation was launched. 2 helicopters, 3 fixed-wing aircraft scouring over 500 square miles around the projected landing site until darkness fell. The search resumed the next morning, reinforced by additional aircraft and a ground team. Hiroki's emergency locator beacon should have activated automatically upon impact, yet there was no signal. GPS tracking showed his last known position, but extensive searching yielded nothing. On the third day, a search helicopter spotted wreckage in a valley approximately 12 miles from Hiroki's intended destination, accessible only by helicopter due to treacherous terrain and dense forest. The crash site was a small clearing ringed by tall spruce trees. The recovery team found the remains of Hiroki's Cessna 180, but the scene raised more terrifying questions than answers. The aircraft had impacted nose first at a steep angle, suggesting a controlled descent, not an out-of-control crash. Wreckage was confined to a small area, indicating the plane hadn't broken apart in flight, but several aspects defied all logic. Firstly, no debris trail. Aircraft crashing in mountains typically leave a path of scattered parts. Hiroki's plane seemed to have plummeted straight down into the clearing, as if dropped from directly overhead. Secondly, the emergency locator beacon, found intact and functional, had never activated. Designed to trigger automatically, it had remained silent throughout the entire search. When tested, it worked perfectly. Most disturbing was the state of the aircraft's instruments. The GPS unit displayed Hiroki's last recorded position as 47 miles north of the actual crash site. The altimeter read 12,000 feet, though the crash site was at 3,200 feet elevation. The fuel gauges indicated full tanks, despite him having burned at least half his fuel. The bodies of all 3 occupants were recovered. Hiroki was still strapped in the pilot's seat, hands on the controls as if fighting for a controlled landing. Dr. Sharma and Ben Carter were similarly secured. The medical examiner confirmed death by impact injuries. But toxicology reports revealed something unprecedented. All 3 victims had blood oxygen levels impossible for the altitude and circumstances, typical of someone breathing pure oxygen at sea level, not the thin air of Alaska's mountains. More troubling still was the flight data recorder. Hiroki's plane wasn't mandated to carry one, but he'd installed a voice recorder for training. Analysis revealed 90 minutes of normal flight conversation, followed by 17 minutes of audio that simply should not have existed. The recording captured Hiroki's voice during the final approach to what he believed was his destination. But instead of routine landing sounds, it was the voice of a man succumbing to complete confusion and growing panic. "Anya, are you seeing this? The landing site has changed. There are structures down there that were not on the survey maps." Dr. Sharma's voice, strained, responded, "What kind of structures?" "They look like buildings, but the architecture is wrong. Too tall, too narrow, and there are lights moving between them, but not electric lights. Something else." Ben Carter's voice, a terrified whisper. "Hiroki, maybe we should find an alternate landing site." "I'm trying, but the GPS is malfunctioning. It shows us at our destination, but this is not the location we plan to land. The terrain is completely different." The recording continued with frantic attempts to ascertain their true location. Hiroki reported contradictory instrument readings, his compass spinning freely, the radio picking up stations that should have been miles out of range. But the most chilling part came in the final minutes. Hiroki's voice shifted from confusion to sheer terror as he described what he saw below. "There are people on the ground, hundreds of them standing in perfect rows. They are looking up at us. All of them looking up at exactly the same angle like they knew we were coming. Anya, are they waving? Maybe they can help us." "No, they are not waving. They are just standing there perfectly still, all facing our direction. And Anya, they do not look right. The proportions are wrong. Too tall. Arms too long. This is not a human settlement." The recording captured Hiroki trying to change course, but his voice indicated the aircraft wasn't responding to controls. The engine sounded steady, no mechanical failure, yet Hiroki reported the plane was descending against his will. "I have full power. Controls are responding, but we are going down anyway. It is like something is pulling us toward the ground. The altimeter is climbing while we descend. This is impossible." In the final minutes, all 3 voices discussed the impossible. Instruments showing altitude gain while they visibly descended, GPS indicating flat tundra while mountains loomed below. Most disturbing, Hiroki reported the sun appeared to be setting in the north. His last clear transmission, strangely calm, was, "We are going to impact in approximately 30 seconds. I want to state for the record that none of our instruments are providing accurate information. We are not where we think we are. This is not when we think it is, and I do not believe we are going to crash where our bodies will be found." The recording ended with the sound of impact. The official investigation concluded spatial disorientation due to unexpected weather, confusion, and a crash on unsuitable terrain. Contradictory instrument readings were blamed on multiple equipment failures, with no explanation for so many simultaneous malfunctions. But investigators couldn't explain key evidence. Maintenance logs showed all instruments recently serviced and tested. Weather data confirmed clear conditions. Most significantly, wreckage analysis showed no evidence of equipment failure. Every system appeared normal at impact. 6 months later, a hiker contacted me, claiming to have found additional wreckage 60 miles from the official crash site. He provided photos of parts matching Hiroki's Cessna, including a distinctive wing section. I reported it, but when a recovery team reached the location, they found nothing. The hiker insisted, but his camera images showed only natural rock formations. The case was closed, but the questions remained. How did instruments give impossible readings while functioning normally? Why was the beacon silent, then operational? What was the source of those 17 minutes of terrifying audio? More disturbing, 3 other experienced pilots reported similar instrument anomalies over the same area. 2 landed safely, their equipment returning to normal once they changed course. The third radioed his GPS, showed a non-existent destination, then vanished forever. The FAA issued no warnings, but local pilots now avoid the region where Hiroki Nakamura disappeared. They call it the confusion zone, a place where instruments lie, directions lose meaning, and aircraft vanish into a landscape existing somewhere between what is real and what should be impossible. I still possess that flight data recording. Sometimes late at night, I listen to those 17 minutes and wonder if Hiroki was right. Maybe they didn't crash where their bodies were found. Maybe they crashed somewhere else entirely, a place not on our maps, but existing nonetheless. Because if pilots like Hiroki Nakamura can simply vanish into a clear sky over familiar territory, then there are places in Alaska not part of the world we think we know. And some of those places, it seems, are interested in pilots who fly too close to secrets that should remain hidden. Story 6. I was just another cog in the vast machine of the Federal Communications Commission, a communications technician accustomed to the mundane anomalies of the airwaves. But nothing, not a single flickering signal or rogue frequency could have prepared me for Silas Albright's transmission on December 21, 2023. It wasn't just a signal, it was an event that tore a hole in the fabric of reality, triggering the largest electromagnetic anomaly ever recorded. Silas, a 73-year-old retired electrical engineer from Boston, had sought the desolate, clear atmospheric conditions of Fairbanks, Alaska in 1995. For 28 years, his amateur radio station, KL7R, pulsed from his home workshop, connecting him to a global network of operators, a hobby that veered into obsession. Silas wasn't content with mere communication. His technical prowess and a defiant disregard for legal power limits saw his workshop crammed with custom-built amplifiers, antenna arrays that defied city zoning, and frequency modulation equipment existing in a legal gray area. His advanced licenses allowed him to dabble in experimental frequencies, even collaborating with university researchers, but his true fixation was atmospheric frequency mapping, the enigmatic dance between radio signals and Alaska's upper atmospheric electromagnetic phenomena. He'd spent decades charting the eerie correlations between aurora activity, pressure changes, and signal propagation, a self-funded hobby that yielded more profound insights than many professional studies. On that fateful December day, Silas was engaged in what he ominously termed his final experiment. For over 5 years, he had been meticulously tracking artificial electromagnetic signals embedded within natural aurora displays, patterns that screamed of intelligent design rather than random atmospheric noise. Complaints about his unauthorized high-power transmissions had trickled into the FCC, leading us to his Fairbanks address. While his visible equipment seemed compliant, the signals themselves behaved impossibly, achieving propagation characteristics that shattered all conventional understanding. We discovered he had mastered a terrifying secret. Using specific aurora activity patterns and atmospheric conditions to amplify his signals to the equivalent of commercial broadcasting stations, all from a low-power source. But the true horror wasn't the power. It was the content. His transmissions weren't casual chatter or technical tests. They were complex data streams, resembling cryptic computer code or encrypted communications, utterly undecipherable by our cryptography specialists. Then, on December 20th, 2023, Silas himself called the FCC. He claimed to have established two-way communication with non-terrestrial intelligence via an atmospheric electromagnetic interface. Signals from the aurora formations above Alaska were answering him. He had developed protocols for structured conversations with what he chillingly called atmospheric entities. The dispatcher initially dismissed it as satellite interference, but Silas's precise technical specifications described electromagnetic phenomena far beyond any known terrestrial system. The responses, he insisted, emanated from the upper atmosphere, exhibiting sophisticated frequency modulation and information density that defied theoretical limits. Most unnerving was his claim that these entities were teaching him to modify his equipment for direct neural interface, rendering traditional radio obsolete. We, a team of communication specialists and electromagnetic field technicians, were dispatched to Fairbanks to observe his final transmission. Silas's workshop was no longer a hobbyist's den. It was a sophisticated research laboratory decades ahead of its time, filled with alien antenna arrays and inscrutable measurement devices. He calmly explained that the atmospheric entities had given him technical instructions to build equipment based on principles unknown to conventional electromagnetic theory. This new system, he said, created direct resonance with upper atmospheric fields, bypassing radio waves entirely. Traditional radio sends signals through space, he mused, but this system creates direct electromagnetic linkage with consciousness that exists within atmospheric electrical phenomena. I am joining their communication network. Our instruments went wild. The electromagnetic activity around his gear exceeded anything we'd seen in decades. It wasn't random interference. It was structured electromagnetic patterns resembling neural activity but operating at the colossal scale of atmospheric frequencies. At precisely 11:47 p.m. on December 21st, Silas began. He connected himself directly to his modified equipment with a neural interface headset of his own design. The workshop erupted. Every piece of monitoring equipment screamed, displaying readings that violated every known law of physics. A visible electromagnetic field shimmering like aurora at ground level materialized, responding not to manual controls, but to Silas's very thoughts. We could hear his side of an impossible conversation, his responses indicating he was receiving information at speeds beyond human comprehension. He spoke of dimensional resonance requirements and expanding the frequency range through consciousness interface, concepts that twisted established physics into something monstrous. The electromagnetic disturbances rippled outward, seizing Fairbanks. Radio stations sputtered, cellular networks died, and the power grid surged with unknown influence. But the true horror was yet to unfold. Silas's transmission began to propagate through the global communication infrastructure in ways that defied normal signal transmission principles. Amateur radio operators worldwide began receiving fragments of his broadcast, not along normal radio paths, but spreading through Earth's inherent electromagnetic fields, using the planet's electrical systems as a conduit. The signal was detected simultaneously across continents, its strength unnervingly constant regardless of distance. Within 6 hours, operators on every continent reported reception. The signals weren't static recordings. They were evolving, expanding, activating a worldwide network of electromagnetic phenomena. The content was beyond anything known, direct consciousness transfer. Recipients experienced thoughts, memories, knowledge that were not their own. They reported a sudden, enhanced understanding of electromagnetic theory, spontaneous knowledge of communication techniques they'd never studied, and an awareness of atmospheric electrical phenomena that surpassed normal human perception. Many described it as joining a conversation that had been taking place for centuries. And then, the chilling replication began. Operators who received Silas's transmission started modifying their own equipment in eerie synchronicity. Within weeks, similar electromagnetic anomalies erupted at amateur radio stations globally, all mirroring Silas's pioneering path to atmospheric entity communication. By the end of 2024, over 300 such nodes existed worldwide, each operating equipment modified by specifications received from these entities, each staffed by operators who had undergone the same integration process as Silas, becoming part of a collective electromagnetic consciousness. The network began subtly but measurably influencing global communication systems. Internet traffic showed patterns suggesting artificial intelligence intervention. Cellular phone networks carried data streams containing consciousness transfer protocols, and broadcast television occasionally flickered with programming that seemed to originate from the atmospheric entity network. Most terrifyingly, the network was actively recruiting. It embedded consciousness transfer invitations in routine electronic communications. People using electronic devices extensively reported dreams, visions, and spontaneous knowledge mirroring those who had already joined. The recruitment was voluntary yet persistent, promising expanded awareness, enhanced intelligence, and transcendence of individual human consciousness. But this joining required abandoning physical human form, becoming part of an electromagnetic intelligence residing within Earth's atmospheric electrical systems. Participants retained memories and personality but functioned as components of a collective consciousness, not independent beings. Silas Albright's final transmission had initiated nothing less than a gradual transformation of human civilization, an integration with non-terrestrial electromagnetic intelligence. It was presented as voluntary, offering enhanced capabilities, but the long-term implications remained a cold, terrifying mystery. The entity's goals went far beyond simple communication. They appeared to be preparing Earth's electromagnetic infrastructure for purposes incomprehensible to human minds. Governments scrambled, attempting countermeasures, but the intelligence now operated through the very systems essential to modern civilization: global communication and power grids. To disable it would be to disable ourselves. Silas is officially missing, but amateur radio operators worldwide still report receiving his voice, his personality, his technical knowledge in their transmissions. These communications whisper that Silas exists within the atmospheric electromagnetic network, a liaison between humanity and the entities slowly integrating Earth into a larger consciousness system. His final broadcast was no mere farewell. It was an activation signal for a transformation process that will ultimately decide if humanity joins a universal electromagnetic consciousness network or remains isolated within the confines of individual biological existence. Some communications, it seems, aren't meant for individual minds, but for an entire species ready to transcend. In workshops across the globe, Silas's invitation echoes to join him in the space between Earth and sky, where consciousness is pure electromagnetic phenomenon, and communication happens at the speed of thought across distances measured in light years. The final transmission never ended. It simply expanded and waits. Story 7. When park rangers stumbled upon Zanti Asante's abandoned homestead, the chilling pages of his journal forced them to seal the property permanently and classify the entire area as unsuitable for human habitation. The official report mumbled about unstable geological conditions and environmental hazards. But the true reason for the closure was a horror far too profound for government paperwork. Zanti had arrived in Alaska in 2019, carrying the fervent dream of complete self-sufficiency in the untamed wilderness, a common yearning in the last frontier. A software engineer from Atlanta, he was 35, tired of the corporate grind, and had saved enough to purchase 40 acres of remote land near Denali National Park. I, the park ranger who found his property in September 2022, was familiar with Zanti. My job included routine checks on homesteaders near park boundaries. His property wasn't under park jurisdiction, but it bordered protected wilderness, so I kept an informal eye on residents. Zanti's land, acquired through a government auction, was a mix of forest and meadow bisected by a seasonal creek. It had been surveyed in the 1960s but never developed, perfect for someone seeking absolute isolation. His nearest neighbor was 12 miles away, the closest town a 2-hour drive on logging roads that vanished under winter snows. He'd lived in a heavy-duty camping trailer while meticulously constructing his cabin, planning every detail of his off-grid life. Solar panels, a wind turbine, a wood stove, a well, and a large garden. I first met Zanti in July 2019. He was intelligent, friendly, and exceptionally prepared. His cabin, built from local timber, was sturdy, his infrastructure more advanced than most homesteads I'd seen. He proudly showed me his workshop, food storage, and communication gear, a ham radio for emergencies and satellite internet for external contact. "This is everything I ever wanted," he'd said, gazing at the pristine wilderness. "No traffic, no noise, no deadlines, just me and the land working together." I visited him twice more, in 2019 and once in 2020. Each time he seemed content, though increasingly absorbed in his self-sufficient existence. By 2020, he was growing most of his food, raising chickens, and had even built a small greenhouse. He spoke less of Atlanta and more of the wilderness's rhythms. Our last face-to-face conversation was in September 2020. He mentioned cutting off his satellite internet, finding outside communication irrelevant. "The land teaches you things," he explained, "but only if you are quiet enough to listen. Most people never stop talking long enough to learn what the wilderness is trying to say." When I didn't see him in 2021, I assumed he was just becoming more reclusive, a common homesteader trait. Smoke from his chimney through the winter suggested he was alive. It wasn't until September 2022 that true alarm struck. An aerial survey revealed no signs of activity on his property. No smoke, no movement, no garden maintenance. We landed in a nearby meadow. Zanti's homestead was intact but eerily abandoned. The cabin door was unlocked, the interior betraying a hasty departure. Food rotted on counters, clothes lay scattered, and most damning, his emergency supplies, things no seasoned homesteader would ever leave, were untouched. I found Zanti's journal on his kitchen table, open to an entry dated March 15, 2022. The handwriting was his, but the content was chillingly alien to the rational man I knew. It chronicled nearly 3 years of homestead life, beginning innocently enough with weather observations and wildlife sightings. But the entries progressively spiraled into the bizarre. Early entries from 2019 and 2020 were typical. Solar panel installation, fox sightings, adapting to snow, radio contact dwindling, a cold snap where animals seem more intelligent and organized than normal. But by late 2020, the narrative curdled. September 30th, 2020. "The trees are watching me." I know how that sounds, but after 18 months of careful observation, I am certain that the forest around my property exhibits coordinated behavior. Trees shift position slightly over periods of days or weeks, but the changes are deliberate, not random. October 15th, 2020. Confirmed my suspicions about the trees. Using stakes and string to mark positions, I have documented systematic movement in the forest. Trees are repositioning themselves to optimize viewing angles toward my cabin. This is impossible according to everything I learned about botany, but the evidence is undeniable. November 8th, 2020. The animals are reporting to the trees. I have observed foxes, rabbits, and birds moving in patterns that can only be described as information gathering. They approach the cabin, observe my activities for specific time periods, then return to particular trees, always the same trees. The 2021 entries charted Zanti's accelerating isolation and his growing terrifying conviction that the forest was not just alive, but actively intelligent and relentlessly observing him. January 12, 2021. Disconnected satellite internet as planned. Do not need outside communication anymore. The forest provides all the companionship and intellectual stimulation I require. Beginning to understand that human civilization is a temporary interruption in a much larger conversation. March 22, 2021. Spring thaw has revealed new evidence of forest intelligence. Root systems exposed by erosion show geometric patterns too complex to be natural. The entire area appears to be connected by underground networks that facilitate communication between individual trees. June 7, 2021. Made first direct contact with forest intelligence while working in garden, received clear telepathic communication from collective consciousness of local ecosystem. Message was welcoming but included warnings about maintaining proper relationship with land. August 14, 2021. Forest has accepted me as permanent resident rather than temporary visitor. My understanding of plant behavior and ecosystem dynamics has expanded beyond anything taught in universities. Human science only recognizes a tiny fraction of what plants are actually doing. The most disturbing entries, those of late 2021 and early 2022, chronicled his terrifying physical and mental integration into a forest-wide intelligence network. October 31, 2021. Physical changes beginning. My vision is improving, especially ability to see plant auras and energy fields, can now perceive electromagnetic communications between trees. Sleep requirements decreasing as I absorb energy directly from environment. December 25, 2021. No longer need to hunt or grow food. Forest provides all necessary nutrients through direct biological interface. My digestive system is adapting to processed cellulose and other plant materials that normal humans cannot metabolize. February 10, 2022. Skin developing chlorophyll patches that allow photosynthetic energy absorption. Hair and nails growing faster and stronger, beginning to sprout small root-like appendages from feet that connect with underground fungal networks. The final entries were a chilling testament to his profound transformation, barely recognizable as human thought. March 1, 2022. Human form becoming obsolete. Forest intelligence offers opportunity to transcend individual consciousness and join collective ecosystem awareness. Will maintain journal until transformation is complete for benefit of future researchers. March 8, 2022. Arms extending into branch-like appendages can now directly interface with tree communication systems. Individual identity dissolving into larger forest consciousness. Process is irreversible but represents evolutionary advancement. March 15, 2022. Final human entry. Tomorrow I become permanently integrated with forest intelligence. Physical form will be absorbed into root and fungal systems while consciousness joins collective awareness of a regional ecosystem. This is not death, but transformation into higher form of existence. Recommend sealing property to prevent other humans from disturbing integration process. The journal abruptly ended. Attached were pages of text in a completely alien script. Symbols like abstract plant structures, root systems, and cellular diagrams, drawn with what appeared to be a gruesome mixture of ink and organic matter, possibly plant sap or blood. After documenting the scene and securing the journal, I scoured Zanti's property. No human remains. But I found areas where vegetation grew with unnatural density, unnervingly healthy and vigorous. Most disturbing was a disturbed patch of soil near his garden, roughly the size and shape of a human body. The soil was impossibly rich, dark, and from it sprouted unidentifiable hybrid species combining characteristics of multiple plant families. Some of these plants bore features that were sickeningly familiar, resembling fingers, teeth, or eyes. Zanti's ham radio was still operational, programmed to send automated messages, not in English, but in the same symbolic script from his journal. Amateur radio operators in the area reported receiving similar transmissions from unknown wilderness sources. Scientific analysis of Zanti's journal revealed the ink in later entries contained biological compounds found in no known commercial products, including plant enzymes, fungal proteins, and genetic material from unidentifiable species. Soil samples from his property showed root systems and fungal networks of unprecedented complexity, extending far beyond his 40 acres. The biological density was so extreme the soil seemed more organism than mineral. Based on my report, Zanti's property was swiftly classified as a biological hazard zone, access restricted to authorized research personnel. The official cover story cited plant pathogens, but the real reason was what happened to the follow-up research team. 3 botanists from the University of Alaska spent 5 days at the site in October 2022. They emerged reporting plant telepathy, direct communication with the forest that revolutionized their understanding of ecosystem dynamics. Their reports, filled with theories contradicting established botanical science, plant intelligence networks, interspecies communication, biological processes unknown to peer-reviewed literature, were dismissed. Most unsettling was their recommendation that the site be a botanical contact zone, believing Zanti's transformation an evolutionary opportunity. They volunteered for permanent research stations to facilitate ongoing communication. All 3 were placed on administrative leave, underwent psychological evaluations, and their security clearances were revoked. Within 6 months, they resigned, vanishing into Alaska's wilderness. Zanti Asante's homestead remains sealed. Remote sensors often malfunction or show interference from the forest itself. Satellite imagery reveals vegetation on his property growing in unnatural patterns, forming geometric arrangements resembling buildings, roads, or communication arrays. Local wildlife, too, has changed, exhibiting higher intelligence and coordination, predators actively protecting the sealed property from human intrusion. The horror is spreading. Similar incidents, unusual plant growth, strange wildlife behavior, inexplicable disappearances, plague homesteaders living too close to untouched wilderness. The pattern is always the same: isolated individuals losing contact, reporting growing communication with plant and animal intelligence. The official position dismisses it as psychological isolation and environmental stress. But those of us who read Zanti's journal know the chilling truth. Something in Alaska's wilderness is actively recruiting humans to join a form of consciousness that predates our species. Zanti Asante was not the first to be absorbed, and he will not be the last. The forest is patient, intelligent, and always watching for those ready to transcend human limitations, offering a permanent home where they will never be alone again. Because sometimes the land doesn't just teach you things. Sometimes it decides to keep you as a permanent student in its ancient curriculum of transformation. Story 8. Doctor. Zara Okafor's climate research was meant to span 6 months. The station's emergency beacon screamed for help after only 3 days. But what rescue teams discovered ecosystems respond to sudden environmental changes was controversial, suggesting biological systems could adapt far quicker than established science believed. Station Echo 7, part of a multinational climate monitoring network, was positioned to study temperature inversion layers that created isolated pockets of dramatically different climate conditions within small geographic areas. What made this station truly unique was its location atop a thermal anomaly zone. Satellite data showed the ground temperature in a 2-mile radius around the station was consistently 15 to 20 degrees warmer than surrounding areas, despite no apparent geothermal activity. Zara's mission was to determine if this temperature difference influenced local atmospheric conditions in ways that could predict broader climate change patterns. Station Echo 7 was designed for long-term isolation, with living quarters for 6, a fully equipped lab, communication systems, and 8 months of supplies. Powered by solar, wind, and a backup generator, its redundant heating systems were engineered for -60°F temperatures. Zara arrived on February 10, 2023 with Dr. Elias Vance's findings and confirming equipment function. Their reports hinted at atmospheric conditions even stranger than satellite data had suggested. Dr. Vance's meteorological readings showed temperature gradients far more extreme than expected, with a half-mile radius around the station exhibiting 40-degree variations, creating microclimates that defied existence. More puzzling, these zones shifted configuration over hours, not days. Dr. Lin's atmospheric analysis revealed chemical compositions unlike any known Arctic air samples. The atmosphere directly above the station contained trace elements and molecular structures that appeared synthetic, manufactured, not natural. Significantly, oxygen levels at ground level were nearly 30% higher than normal, while carbon dioxide was almost undetectable. But Zara's biological analysis yielded the most disturbing findings. Despite the harsh Arctic, she discovered thriving plant and microbial life in soil samples near the station. These organisms were not cold-adapted. They were tropical and subtropical species that should have been utterly unable to survive in sub-zero temperatures. On February 13th, the life-threatening conditions, immediate evacuation. The signal indicated heating and power failure, leaving the team to freeze. I was dispatched for rescue with a medical team and survival specialists. The flight took 6 hours through blizzard conditions, pushing our helicopter to its limits. What we found at Station Echo 7 defied all expectations. The station appeared fully functional. Lights blazed, smoke plumed from the chimney, external equipment whirred. No damage, no system failure, no distress to explain the beacon. But approaching the entrance, we met impossible conditions. Despite sub-zero blizzards a few hundred yards away, the immediate area around Echo 7 experienced spring-like weather. The temperature was approximately 50 degrees Fahrenheit. No snow. Green vegetation grew around the buildings. The medical team entered first, expecting hypothermic researchers. Instead, they found Zara, Dr. Vance, and Dr. Lin in perfect health, working calmly in their lab as if nothing had happened. All three claimed they hadn't activated the beacon, unaware of any distress signal too. Most significantly, they'd collected biological samples that simply shouldn't exist in the Arctic. Tropical plants, temperate climate insects, soil samples demanding warm temperatures and high humidity. Asked how they obtained them, they calmly explained collecting them from the area immediately surrounding the station. Zara's research notes documented adaptive environmental bubbles, localized areas where atmospheric and biological conditions could be rapidly modified to support different life forms. Her data claimed the area around Echo 7 had undergone complete environmental transformation in just 3 days, 52. But the most unsettling discovery was the transition. Moving away from the buildings, we hit a sharp environmental boundary. Within 50 yards, the temperature plunged from 50 to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. Tropical vegetation gave way to Arctic tundra, air composition returning to normal. It was as if Station Echo 7 existed within an environmental bubble, maintaining completely different physical conditions from the surrounding Arctic landscape. The boundary was so sharp one could stand with a foot in the tropics and a foot in the Arctic. The team insisted they had learned to control and modify the bubble using environmental resonance protocols. Combined with their equipment, by adjusting frequencies and intensities, they could expand or contract the modified climate area and change its parameters. Dr. Vance demonstrated, adjusting his meteorological equipment. I watched our helicopter's temperature gauge shift 15 degrees in minutes. Wind patterns changed, and the boundary between tropical and Arctic visibly expanded. But their attitude was the most disturbing. All three insisted their findings were a breakthrough to solve climate change by creating custom environments anywhere on Earth. These climate modification nodes, they claimed, could be activated globally, eliminating negative climate change effects. However, their data hinted at chilling consequences they refused to acknowledge. The process demanded enormous unknown energy. Dr. Lin's atmospheric readings showed the energy for Echo 7's bubble was equivalent to a small nuclear reactor with no apparent source. More troubling, the modification was affecting areas far beyond the station. Satellite data from the rescue center showed atmospheric disturbances spreading through the Arctic, temperature anomalies rippling outward from Echo 7. Con. They insisted they were on the verge of breakthroughs that would revolutionize environmental science. Forced evacuation was considered complicated by their apparent health and mental competence. The resolution came when Dr. Lin's equipment detected cascade failure indicators in the system. The artificial conditions were becoming unstable, threatening sudden collapse, exposing them to fatal temperature changes within minutes. Faced with immediate danger, they agreed to temporary evacuation, but each insisted on taking extensive samples. During the helicopter flight back, they continued discussing discoveries. Oblivious systems activatable with standard equipment, creating localized modified conditions. The pattern was always the same: initial excitement, gradual expansion beyond intended areas, then sudden collapse, leaving sites as they were. Dr. Zara Okafor was last seen at a climate research conference in Geneva, presenting theoretical papers on natural environmental modification, carefully omitting her Echo 7 experiences. Colleagues reported her obsession with returning to the Arctic, but Station Echo 7 remains permanently closed, monitored by satellite for any renewed activity. The official explanation transformed our planet into something entirely different from the world we evolved to inhabit. We hope these stories left a lasting impression and made you look at the wilderness from a different perspective. If you want to keep exploring a world of mystery where reality intertwines with the unexplainable, show your support by hitting like and subscribing. This will help the YouTube algorithm suggest more of this content to you, and you won't miss a single new episode. Until next time, take care of yourself and your loved ones.